Stay tuned to the end of this video for a word to our patrons. Hello everyone and welcome back to Let's Talk FGO Wanted, the show where we let you know if you want to roll that 5-star. We're here to talk about a story-locked Lancer today. One you might already know, because it's Bhima. It's fresh off his non-combat debut during Valentine's. This is your first time checking out Wanted. This is a show where we talk history and folklore, fate lore, mechanics, and more. So big yay. And yes, this one's a little late. The audio call one fired a little later than I thought. You know, they gave us a couple extra days over the weekend. But I've been busy with other projects. And also, I got into Andor finally this weekend. It's really good. Don't, discuss it or post spoilers in the comments of this video, though. While I will probably be caught up by the time this all goes live. Be nice to other people. But let's transition into the real meat of the show. Anyway, that means it's Mahabharata time. It's been a while since I did an episode on this subject, but we are going to have to, unfortunately, summarize a lot because the Indian epic is incredibly massive. It's about 200,000 lines, which is about 10 times as large as the Iliad and Odyssey combined. But it is, one of the biggest... Well, first of all, I think it's one of the biggest pieces of writing ever, but it is also a major foundational text in Indian culture. So, yeah, we're here. But, like I said, we gotta summarize a little. Bhima, also Bhimasena, is the second of the 5 Pandava brothers, which is Yudhishthira, Bhima, Arjuna, Nakula, and Sahadeva. Bhima is regarded as, being very large and strong. He's the big guy of the group, even though they're not really a 5-man band. Yes, I know there's 5 of them, but my understanding is that the twins don't get as much coverage as the older 3 brothers. Anyway, Bhima's name can be translated as meaning terrifying or fearsome. He's the big, tough, scary guy. Pandava refers to the sons of Pandu, the king of Kuru. Pandu was cursed to be unable to sire children. Technically, he was unable to, bone, but that would lock out the other part. So each of his sons are actually sired by different gods, devas, and Bhima was sired by Vayu, the wind god. This inherently, gives him the supernatural strength and tallness, and there's a prophecy saying he would be the mightiest warrior, the strongest of the strong, and Bhima is usually depicted as a master of fighting with the mace or club, big clubbin. After Pandu dies, their mother Kunti takes them to live with their cousins, the Kauravas, the 100 sons of Dhritarashtra. Slowing some of the syllables together, I'm sorry. Anyway, because they are magical special boys, the Pandavas often outcompete their cousins, beat them up in wrestling matches and all kinds of other stuff like that. This leads to a lot of, kind of jealousy, envy, suspicion, and other stuff, which is also spurned on by the remnants of previous conflict, because where's a giant generational epic without a little bit of generational conflict and the cycle of revenge? Anyway, the eldest of the Kauravas, Duryodhana, who, despite having some bravery and martial skills himself, he also gets some martial kills, but there's supposed to be an S in front of that. We'll leave that take in. Anyway, Duryodhana really exemplifies the ideal of what a member of the warrior class should be, but he develops a little bit of jealousy and ambition and plots to overthrow the Pandavas. In one such scheme, Duryodhana has Bhima, who is usually depicted as enjoying a big meal and also being personally kind of the source of a lot of Duryodhana's complex about this, because, the Pandavas would challenge their 100 cousins to wrestling, and Bhima always wins because he's magically strong. But Duryodhana has Bhima poisoned and thrown in a river. But this ends up with Bhima, going to the underwater Naga realm and meeting Vaski, king of serpents, who gives him a magical elixir, which not only heals him, but makes him even more strong. It gives him the strength of 1,000 elephants. Good plan, Duryodhana. Anyway, Duryodhana's next plan doesn't work either. He attempts to give his cousins a very flammable palace. Yes, correct. They escape into the jungle and lay low for a while. Eventually, they go to a forest which are inhabited by some Rakshasa, Hidimba and his sister Hidimbi. Hidimbi is supposed to trick the Pandavas, but she falls in love with Bhima's strength instead, asks to marry him. This causes Hidimba to attack the group in a rage and get killed. Kunti acquiesces to the marriage so long as Bhima can return to his family in due time, so this is his first wife. And the two do have a Rakshasa son who is a strong fighter when the Kurukshetra war breaks out later. There is, of course, also the story of the Princess Draupadi, where Arjuna wins an archery contest while all the brothers are incognito, gets the hand of the local princess in marriage, she picks him, and then in a sitcom twist, they return to their hideout to speak to their mother, without looking back, she says for the brothers to share what they want among each other. She didn't know they were talking about a woman, and so in a sitcom twist, Draupadi ends up married to all the Pandava brothers. It's like such a sitcom twist. But this process means that they are revealed, so they got to deal with reallocating of some land, so on and so forth. Half their kingdom, or half the kingdom of Kuru, I should say, it's not their kingdom yet, is split between the two to kind of make up for like the fact that they're feuding. But Duryodhana's not happy about this. But when they're reallocating the land, Bhima takes part in some military campaigns. He shows his prowess and valor. It's not really deathly important to our narrative here. Just know that, we've got the preamble of the narrative where he shows that he's a serious contender. He's a big, strong force in the narrative. He wins group battles and personal victories in wrestling and so on and so forth. But eventually, like I said, there's some tension with the Kauravas. And they get into the infamous dice game. Yudhisthira wagered and lost basically everything because the other side was cheating. This includes himself, his kingdom, even Draupadi. There's a lot of, hemming and hawing and mocking from the other side. Bhima is particularly annoyed by the serious events and has to be stopped from just beating up people in the room several times. And eventually, for the insult, he swears vengeance against the Kauravas for their treatment, especially of Draupadi. He vows to crush Duryodhana's thigh, which is a metaphor for his junk. Anyway, as a result of the dice game, they're exiled for many years. During this time, there is another case where Bhima has a personal anecdote. The rest of the Pandavas are concerned for Arjuna, who's gone to seek divine weapons from Shiva. He's gone up into the Himalayas. They all go up after him, including Draupadi. At one point, she's resting, and she gets interested in some special flowers. They have a particular scent. Bhima's like, I'll go get them. Goes down to check out there, and he runs into Hanuman, the monkey god, who's a major figure in the Ramayana. And also, Bhima's half-brother via the deva Vayu. After some, competition and boasting and posing, and probably some JoJo posing. Look at that guy. Bhima humbles himself for Hanuman before even knowing who he is, and gets his blessing, and he gets to gather some flowers from a forest, which is filled with Rakshasa normally. But after the 13th year they were away, the brothers had to be incognito. Bhima took the guise of a palace cook. So he is also, not only does he enjoy a fine meal, he can make a fine meal. He became head chef of a palace. Very good for him. But there's another minor story here of him once again defending Draupadi's honor. She gets solicited and disguised as a maid, and the short version is that Bhima kills that guy, and then kills some more guys when they blame Draupadi for his death anyway. You may be noticing a pattern here. But yes, after all the exile and stuff, the Kauravas, of course, refused to give the Pandavas back their kingdom, and that's the Kurukshetra War. During the war, Bhima is armed with a chariot, a bow named Vayava, or possibly Vayavya. There's two Y's and two V's in there. But that's given by Vayu. And he's given a mace by Mayasura, which is as strong as 100,000 maces, because Bhima is so strong that if he were to use a normal mace, it would merely shatter after one blow. I am not going into detail on the war. There's a whole huge of text here, which relates to, 18 days of fighting continuously. Every day there's another battle. A lot of it is kind of the same thing. There's a lot of battles that are fought. A lot of people get killed. Bhima personally wins a lot of fights. He defeats Duryodhana a billion times. I think based on the summaries I've read, fights Duryodhana almost every day and beats him up. Doesn't kill him yet. He does eventually fulfill all of his oaths, though. He drinks that one guy's blood that I didn't mention earlier. But also he wins a duel with Duryodhana by crushing his thigh by throwing a mace at him, even though the below-the-belt attack is considered against the rules of war. Honestly, if you want me to editorialize a little, the Mahabharata, and particularly the I shouldn't try and say the Kurukshetra war rapidly. But, if you want me to interpolate, the whole thing is kind of it literally includes a discussion of what is righteous war, is kind of a discussion of, the concept of, violence and warfare and if it can be good. And even though the Pandavas are the good guys, they are the morally correct ones because they are not doing all this scheming and plotting and stuff. They end up doing quite a few oopsies in their quest for righteous revenge, whereas their opponents, and, Duryodhana in particular, he's a very shifty guy. He's kind of a little wormy little guy. He's kind of a bad man, but he's charismatic, and he sticks to kind of, the defined rules of his social class, while also being willing to go outside it and befriend Karna, but that's a whole different narrative. Anyway, it's just a interesting commentary, kind of back and forth. Interpolate that one however you will. Anyway, they win the kingdom, they rule things for a little while, but eventually, they had to kill a lot of people to get here, so the Pandavas renounce the world and they attempt to climb the Himalayas to get into heaven and abandon their earthly forms. Basically, all of them except Yudhisthira fall along the way. They do enter the abode of heaven, but they don't, achieve that final moment of enlightenment. They die before they can properly abandon their earthly forms. Bhima is usually cited as either his gluttony, enjoying a good meal, his boastfulness, or his battle lust being why he failed the journey. He stuck out like second longest, but eventually is overcome. And to not make this section of the video take longer than it needs to, as an aside, Bhima is also pretty prominent in Indonesian culture as well. I didn't really look too deep into that angle because that's not necessarily important for the Wanted, because the Fate version is much more based around, very simply, the Mahabharata. But it's a cool thing to note. Give you some additional reading you can do. Now, normally my next segment is lore, but honestly, there's not a lot of lore that's Fate-specific to get into with Bhima. He was a effectively minor character in the Johanna Valentines earlier this year. He was not fought. He wasn't a fightable character yet, but he did offer some philosophical challenge that was thematic. So, he did recur, but still, it was a relatively short story, so he has a secondary role in it. His big debut is obviously in the incoming story chapter, Ordeal Call number 1, Paper Moon, but obviously, spoilers. Obviously, also, he has been alluded to previously because we've known about the Pandava brothers because we have Arjuna and Karna involved, but, he hasn't really been a major feature in the story. What I do want to bring up, though, is that this is kind of one of those cases where I think they picked a class container because we really needed a Lancer for the story structure, not necessarily because it is the best fit. With his famous strength, his temper, his use of the mace, Bhima should probably be a berserker, like Duryodhana, who closely rivals him and duels him constantly, and they have a climactic mace fight. He is a berserker. Or maybe an archer, because he is supposed to have a bow. His noble phantasm says it takes the form of a wind barrier lance. That's not really associated with Vayu at all. Vayu is associated with maces or perhaps a goad, aka a cattle prod, not the electric kind, but the original kind. Something you do to spur pack animals into moving. Vayu's divine weapon is the Vayavyastra. It's invoked? That's not the right consonant at all. Invoked by Arjuna. Apparently I couldn't say that very fast. In the stories, to wield the powers of wind, Vayu's wind is described as, destroying mountaintops and stuff like that. So, that fits. But also, none of the other, magical implements Bhima has in the story are mentioned here. I think they just needed him to be a Lancer for the obvious reasons of having 7 class slots. And they can't have him be an archer because they have another just as important character to be an archer in that role in the story. If you were to see, Bhima show up at a normal Grail War, like I said, I would go, Berserker 10 out of 10, maybe an archer. Honestly, if you want the Pandava who seems like he should be a Lancer, that's probably Yudhishthira, who is described as a master of spears and javelins. But like I said, you will dive into more of any Fate-specific tricks with Bhima in the Ordeal Call story, which some of you are already probably quite well through. So that's where we'll put an end to that and move on. That next section is mechanics. Bhima's a Lancer, he's 5-star, he's higher along the curve for attack, but lower on maximum HP, he has a similar stat spread to Melusine. Also, people don't ask about this, but I want to clarify, because sometimes I feel like I get too complacent with my language. That's not to say that his attack is higher than the number that is his HP. That rarely happens in FGO. There's only a couple of 5-stars that are that way. But his relative stats among other 5-star Lancers, higher attack, lower HP value. He is Quick Arts Buster. That's an old-school standard for Lancers. Some of our first Lancers ever have that deck. And he has pretty average hits, so high NP gain as a result. It's in the 0.7 ranges. His Noble Phantasm is a single-target buster. It gives him 50% crit up for 3 turns first. Not that that actually matters, but it's nice. What it does matter, though, is that it removes the target's buffs first as well. And the overcharge effect is very interesting. So it adds additional hits and damage if your overcharge is 2 or better. So the additional hits, which do mean a different animation, by the way, but the additional hits proc at any amount of time or any amount of overcharge value. But the amount of damage, extra damage it deals is proportional to what your overcharge percentage is. So it can be quite striking in that area. His first skill is a 1x 3 turns Guts for 2k to 3k. It's also a 20 to 30% battery and removes his own debuffs. Pretty standard stuff there. His second skill is another pretty standard damage steroid, 20 to 30% buster and crit up for 3 turns and generates 5 to 15 stars. So it gives you little stars to work with that crit buff. Final skill is a 20 to 30% attack up on himself for 3 turns, giving him, yet another steroid. But also it gives him 3 turns of on-attack buffs. His quick cards give you 10% crit up for 3 when you hit with them, and his buster cards generate 5 stars flat. So kind of playing with some other tropes we've seen to, increase basic card effectiveness means that you'll be able to get some funny stacks with quick, especially since they did, kind of rework how quick works. So now that if you have a quick card first, you get flat-out crit chance for quick chains. Not even quick chains, but, quick first card. Could be useful. His passes are pretty simple. He has a magic resistance C, so he's got a little bit of debuff resist at all times. He has a divinity B, so that he's always doing a little bit of damage plus, and he's also straight up immune to poison. Bhima cannot be poisoned. And honestly, looking at it, Bhima's kit's pretty simple. He feel like he could have been released anywhere in, like, the past 5 years or so. Like, the craziest stuff he does is the on-attack buff with 2 card colors, and we've been doing that at least since the Dioscuri, which is, like, 2 years ago? No, it has to be, like, 3 years ago at this point, right? 2.5, probably, actually, to be more accurate. Anyway, it's been quite a while, and the rest of his kit is, like, fairly boilerplate. But he's here to kill bosses, and he does have what I like to describe as the patented anti-asshole technology built in. He buff strips first. Servants that buff strip first are very strong in their own right. Usually those who have done this classically have been hampered by having very low attack. The first couple servants to do this, were Amakusa, who had an AoE buster that, like, at one point couldn't kill Bronze Hands, and single target Abigail, who also has, like, a very hampered attack stat. Bhima does not have this problem, so you will be punching pretty hard. Now, I do want to say, his competition for single-target Buster Lancer 5s, Lancer 5 stars, those are almost all trait damage-based. He doesn't do that, so unless you're really cranking his overcharge, he is probably not going to out-damage them versus their preferred prey. But on the flip side, it does mean that you don't have to worry about being picky and choosing about fights. His extra damage is based purely on overcharge. This does mean that you're going to want some overcharge boosters, and you're also probably going to want to try and invest in multiple NP copies to make it easier if you can. That said, what I think Bhima also does very well is follow-up. His NP steroid and his NP himself means he's going to get 3 turns of 80% crit if that skill is fully leveled. Keep in mind that, remember, the standard for FGO is 100%, double crit damage is usually only a 1-turn buff, so 80% for 3 is pretty good. And his deck has more ability with his third skill to add more crit buffs and add more stars. You, what would it be? NPQQ, and you've fired all 3 skills. There you go. You've got 100% for, like, the next 2 turns. That's pretty good. Makes him very well suited for bosses with break bars. For team comp, I think you've got a couple of options. Bhima does have a battery, but it's not a big one. It's only a 30%er. And he's single target, so you're probably not really trying to farm here, so the Koyan reload really isn't in the cards. But it does mean you can go a little further afield. You want to hit bosses hard, you should consider the old standby Merlin. That gives you hard defenses, more max HP, and huge crit gains, but doesn't have that special overcharge spice. You're mostly going to be using probably his NP to, like, buff strip and then just try and hit some big, meaty buster crits. If you want to do the overcharge spice, I would recommend trying to hit with a Himiko NP. Himiko's NP is buster up, crit up, and overcharge up. Hell yeah. Or the skills on a variety of Da Vinci's. Quite a few Da Vinci's have the overcharge up now, or will later through buffs, so they can be very interesting support. Obviously, Ruler Da Vinci, the summer variant, she has a, multicolor card buff as well, so you can slot in some stuff. As one that's kind of like, it's good, but it's bad, Koyan of Dark has some really good buffs for Bhima, like giving him the overcharge crank and the buster and stuff, but he is still, a hominid, a humanoid man, and so Koyan will hurt his Star Absorb, which he doesn't want because he wants to take full advantage of his crit buffs by getting a lot of crit on him. So that's one you can use, but be careful about how you approach it. Try to pair with, like, either alternatives to increase Star Absorb or other servants who will not have that problem. And for craft essences, I don't really have any specific suggestions. I'm just going to say in general, you're going to want to look for Buster Up, Overcharge Up, and Crit Up. Starting NP is good, but not essential depending on who you pick for support. There are a few other servants who also have, like, Overcharge level ups that you can consider. Sima Yi can do it on NP and stuff like that. So there's a few different tricks you can try there. And that leads us to my famous other stuff part of the show. And sadly, I'm going to warn you, chat. Go warn your people at home. Bhima's going to need some mats. Not for his essential. Those are all normal stuff. You got, like, giant rings and Hydra vodka. Can be problematic, but you've had plenty of years to stock up if you've been playing for a while. And if you're a new player, you'll be getting reserves of this as you clear. No. The problem will be his skills. Each skill to max level requires 72 of the brand new bronze mat, the Vestiges. And that sucks. That always sucks, but there it is. Somebody's got to do it. 72 bronze mats. And I will also say that despite being story locked to Ordeal Call number 1's completion, which I am reminding you of, he gets a fair amount of rate ups. He's going to be available right now for the Sorry, I almost said Overcharge 1. It's because I wrote Overcharge as OC so much in my notes. For the Ordeal Call 1 release, and will have an appearance for the pre-release campaign for Ordeal Call 2. He is a male unit who is only story-locked, not limited, so he will appear on future Caldea Boys Collections runs. And also, there will be an Ordeal Call 1 support campaign, a clear campaign to, incentivize people who haven't cleared it yet. And also, JP has been doing basically all year a series of class-based summons, of which, as a Lancer, Bhima has already occurred on that. So, over the next 2 years, you've got, 5 banner opportunities. Also, while not as he is not a limited, correcting my grammar there, I don't think he'll be on Lucky Bag summons upcoming. He should be in Destiny Order summons. You can pick him as your possible raid-up Lancer. But that's what we got. Happy hunting, everyone. Enjoying your new story release. Enjoy my recommendation for Andor, I guess. And we'll see you on out of here. Get ready for our, big boy thoughts and stuff later, probably. So, that means we do the outro. If you watch this video on YouTube, like it, comment it, subscribe it, ring the bell. Consider joining the channel memberships. And you can support us on Patreon, like our fine patrons do at the back half. Could have gotten this video a little early. Oh, and consider joining our Discord. We got a roll thread. And that is it for me. I'm going to get on out of here. And before we go, I'd like to thank all of our patrons who make these videos possible, but especially Adam DeHart, Blacklist G, Call Me Zed, Carlos, Dragon, JD Van 1000, Starlight, Legendary Boss Hunter, Rise of Kenji, Rogue Robin, Shervor, Harry the Crow. Thank you much for your support, patrons, and we'll see you in the next episode.